Welcome to Unknown Suspect, the channel where silence hides secrets and every detail matters. Join legendary detective Hercule Poirot as he unravels mysteries built on deception, logic, and the power of observation. Settle in, listen closely, and remember, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. The Ashcombe Court Mystery. Chapter 1. A disturbance at Ashcombe Court. Ashcombe Court rose gently from the rolling Dorset countryside like a well-kept secret. Its honey-coloured stone walls, softened by age and sea air, caught the late afternoon light in a manner both dignified and welcoming. From a distance, the house appeared serene, even contented, as though nothing truly troubling had ever occurred within its rooms. The neatly trimmed hedges, the gravel drive swept clean, and the tall windows reflecting the pale autumn sky all spoke of order, an order that Hercule Poirot deeply appreciated. Poirot stood at the foot of the steps, taking in the symmetry of the building with approval. He adjusted his coat, smoothed his moustache with a precise movement, and allowed himself a small nod. "Très bien," he murmured, "a house that respects itself." He had arrived that morning, by train, invited by Sir Lionel Ashcombe, a retired industrialist of considerable means and reputation. The letter had been polite, even warm, yet something in its phrasing had stirred Poirot's curiosity. Sir Lionel had written of a personal unease, and a matter requiring a mind trained in observation rather than haste. Poirot, though enjoying a period of well-earned rest, had recognized the familiar undertone of anxiety concealed beneath courtesy. Now, as he was welcomed into the house by a quiet maid and shown to his room, Poirot sensed a faint tension in the air, subtle but unmistakable. The corridors were spotless, the furnishings carefully arranged, yet there was a stillness that felt strained, as though the house itself were holding its breath. Sir Lionel received him shortly before luncheon. He was a tall man in his late 60s, his silver hair neatly combed, his posture still erect, despite his years. His handshake was firm, but Poirot noticed a slight hesitation, a momentary tightening of the fingers. "My dear Monsieur Poirot," Sir Lionel said, smiling, "you are most kind to come on such short notice." "It is my pleasure, Sir Lionel," Poirot replied, though I confess curiosity played its part. Sir Lionel gave a brief, uneasy laugh. "I imagined it might." They spoke politely over lunch, joined by the other residents of Ashcombe Court. There was Clara Ashcombe, Sir Lionel's niece, composed and capable, with intelligent eyes that missed little. Gerald Whitcomb, Sir Lionel's business partner, appeared distracted, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. Miss Evelyn Price, the secretary, sat quietly, her notebook placed neatly beside her plate, as though even at table she remained at work. Lastly, Mrs. Harriet Blundell, a family friend, spoke freely and at length, offering opinions on everything from the weather to the decline of modern manners. Poirot listened more than he spoke, observing small details with careful interest. The way Sir Lionel barely touched his food, the manner in which Miss Price refilled his teacup before it was empty, the faint irritation that crossed Mr. Whitcomb's face whenever business matters were mentioned. Nothing as yet was alarming, and yet Poirot felt that the harmony was artificial, maintained by effort rather than ease. The afternoon passed quietly. Tea was arranged for 4 o'clock, a ritual Sir Lionel insisted upon daily. Poirot retired briefly to his room, intending to rest. He had just begun to unpack when a sound cut through the calm of the house. A cry. It was sharp, sudden, and unmistakably one of alarm. Poirot was already in the corridor when doors began to open along its length. Voices called out. Footsteps hurried toward the study at the end of the hall. Poirot followed at a measured pace, his expression grave. Inside the study, chaos had replaced order. Sir Lionel lay slumped forward over his desk, his head turned slightly to one side. A teacup lay shattered on the carpet, dark liquid seeping into the fabric. Papers were scattered, though not wildly, as if disturbed more by collapse than struggle. Clara stood frozen near the doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth. Miss Price had gone pale, gripping the back of a chair for support. Mr. Whitcomb hovered uncertainly, his face drawn. Mrs. Blundell, to her credit, had already sent for the village doctor. Poirot approached the desk slowly. He did not touch anything. He did not speak. He simply observed. Sir Lionel's expression was not one of pain, but of surprise. His eyes were half open, his features slack. The room was otherwise immaculate. No sign of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no obvious weapon. The doctor arrived swiftly and conducted a brief examination. He straightened and shook his head. "I'm afraid Sir Lionel is dead," he said quietly. "It appears to have been a sudden failure of the heart." A heavy silence followed. Poirot inhaled gently. He stepped closer, noticing the position of the teacup fragments, the untouched saucer on the tray, the faint, unusual scent lingering in the air, barely perceptible, but distinct enough to register in his mind. "Pardon, Doctor?" Poirot said politely. "May I ask, was death instantaneous?" The doctor hesitated. "Near enough, I would say." Poirot nodded. He glanced at the tea service. One cup broken, one cup untouched. Curious. Clara spoke at last, her voice steady but strained. "Uncle Lionel was in his study alone. He seemed quite well not an hour ago." Miss Price added quickly, "He asked for tea as usual, nothing out of the ordinary." Poirot's eyes flicked towards her. "As usual," he repeated softly. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped behind a cloud, casting the study into muted shadow. What had been a peaceful English house now felt altered, its calm disturbed, its order questioned. Poirot straightened, smoothing his moustache. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said gently, "I know this is a shock, but I must ask that nothing in this room be disturbed further." They looked at him startled. "You see," Poirot continued, his voice calm but firm, "a man does not always die simply because his heart decides to stop. Sometimes there is a reason. And reasons leave traces." He gazed once more at Sir Lionel Ashcombe, then at the silent figures around him. "This," said Hercule Poirot, "is a matter that will require patience, honesty, and the strictest attention to detail." And somewhere deep within Ashcombe Court, the first quiet thread of truth began to unravel. Chapter 2. The circle draws closed. The immediate aftermath of Sir Lionel Ashcombe's death was marked by confusion wrapped in courtesy. No one raised their voice, no one wept openly. Instead, there was a stiff politeness, as though good manners might keep disorder at bay. Poirot observed this with interest. The doctor, having completed his examination, quietly withdrew to telephone the authorities. Until they arrived, the household was advised to remain together. Clara Ashcombe took charge with admirable composure, directing the servants to bring blankets, close doors, and prepare the drawing-room. Poirot followed the others there, noting how each person chose a seat with unconscious care. Mr. Whitcomb positioned himself near the window, as if needing air. Mrs. Blundell sat upright on the sofa, hands folded, her eyes sharp and restless. Miss Price selected a straight-backed chair close to the door, her posture rigid, her notebook clutched tightly against her chest. Poirot himself chose an armchair slightly apart from the rest. From there, he could see everyone clearly. "My friends," Clara said after a moment, "this is dreadful for all of us. Until the police arrive, I suggest we remain calm and assist in any way we can." "A sensible suggestion," Poirot said mildly. All eyes turned to him. It was only then Poirot noticed that the others truly seemed to register his presence, not as a guest, but as something else. Mrs. Blundell tilted her head. "You are the Belgian detective, are you not? The famous one?" Poirot inclined his head. "At your service, madame, though I wish the circumstances were happier." Mr. Whitcomb cleared his throat. "Then you don't believe this was, natural?" Poirot did not answer at once. He took out a small handkerchief and dabbed delicately at his lips, buying time. "I believe," he said carefully, "that it is too soon to believe anything at all." Miss Price shifted slightly in her chair. The room fell quiet again. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and the house creaked faintly, as old houses do, settling around their secrets. Poirot decided it was time to begin. "Perhaps," he suggested gently, "it would be helpful if each of you told me where you were when Sir Lionel was in his study this afternoon. Not as an accusation, you understand, merely to establish clarity." Mrs. Blundell spoke first, without hesitation. "I was in the garden, trimming roses. The air was quite bracing. I returned only when I heard shouting." Mr. Whitcomb nodded. "I was in the east sitting room, reviewing correspondence. Sir Lionel and I had disagreed earlier, but nothing serious." Poirot noticed the faint emphasis on the last words. Miss Price said quietly, "I had prepared the tea in the pantry. After that, I was organizing files in my room." Clara took a breath. "I was upstairs, speaking with the housekeeper." Poirot listened, his expression polite, his mind alert. Their accounts overlapped neatly. Too neatly, perhaps. No contradictions, no obvious gaps. "How orderly," he murmured, almost to himself. Mrs. Blundell frowned. "What do you mean by that, Monsieur Poirot?" He smiled. "Only that truth, madame, is often less tidy." He turned his attention to Mr. Whitcomb. "You said you and Sir Lionel disagreed earlier. May I ask the nature of this disagreement?" Whitcomb's jaw tightened. "Business. He wished to delay a decision. I felt it was unwise. Did you raise your voice?" "A little," Whitcomb admitted. "But we have argued before. He was alive and well when I left him." Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. "And you, Miss Price," he continued. "You prepared the tea. Was that at Sir Lionel's request?" "Yes," she replied promptly. "He rang for it, as he does every afternoon." "As he does every afternoon," Poirot repeated softly, echoing her earlier words. Miss Price's fingers tightened around her notebook. Poirot rose and paced slowly to the fireplace, where the flames had been extinguished. He leaned forward, peering into the grate. There were ashes there, nothing unusual, but among them he noticed the corner of a partially burned envelope. "Curious," he said aloud. Clara looked startled. "What is it?" "Later," Poirot replied gently. "We will speak of it later." He straightened and returned to his chair. "Tell me," he said, addressing the group as a whole, "had Sir Lionel seemed anxious recently?" There was a pause. Clara answered slowly. "He had been preoccupied, concerned about something, though he did not confide in me." Mrs. Blundell gave a short nod. "He suspected someone, I think. He asked me odd questions about trust." Miss Price looked down at her lap. Mr. Whitcomb let out a dry laugh. "Lionel always suspected someone. It was his nature." Poirot's eyes flicked toward him. "Was it?" Whitcomb stiffened but said nothing. The detective leaned back, folding his hands. Already the picture was forming, not of a crime, but of a state of mind. Anxiety, suspicion, quiet tensions beneath a polished surface. Outside, the sound of a motor car approached, gravel crunching sharply. The police had arrived. As footsteps echoed in the hall, Poirot allowed himself a small, thoughtful sigh. "The circle," he said softly, "is now closed." He looked at each face in turn, Clara's controlled calm, Whitcomb's guarded irritation, Mrs. Blundell's sharp curiosity, and Miss Price's carefully maintained stillness. "Within this circle," Poirot continued, "lies the truth of Sir Lionel Ashcombe's final hour. It will not announce itself loudly, it will whisper." A knock sounded at the door. Poirot rose. "Let us listen very carefully," he said. And with that, the investigation truly began. Chapter 3. A Death Without Violence. The presence of the police altered the atmosphere of Ashcombe Court, though only slightly. Uniformed order replaced social courtesy, yet the tension remained carefully contained, as though everyone feared that one wrong word might fracture the fragile calm. Inspector Hale, a solid man with thoughtful eyes, took charge with quiet efficiency. He listened attentively as the village doctor repeated his findings. "No sign of struggle," the doctor said. "No injury, heart failure, sudden and severe." Inspector Hale nodded and turned to Poirot. "You have already examined the room, monsieur?" Poirot inclined his head. "With my eyes only. I prefer to disturb nothing until I understand everything." Hale allowed himself a faint smile. "Then perhaps we should look together." They returned to the study. The room was once again silent, yet the silence felt heavier now, as though weighted by expectation. The late light slanted through the tall windows, illuminating the desk where Sir Lionel had died. Everything appeared respectable, controlled. Too controlled for a moment of sudden death. Poirot moved slowly, deliberately. He noted the angle of the chair slightly pushed back, as if Sir Lionel had risen or attempted to do so. The desk blotter was unmarked, the papers neatly aligned. Only the shattered teacup on the carpet suggested interruption. Poirot crouched, studying the fragments. "One cup broken," he said, yet the tray held two. Inspector Hale frowned. "Perhaps one was for a guest." "Perhaps," Poirot agreed mildly, but no guest drank. He straightened and examined the untouched cup. There was a faint mark on the rim, no more than a trace. Poirot lifted it carefully and sniffed. "Do you smell anything?" he asked. Hale leaned closer. "Tea? Nothing unusual." Poirot nodded, but his eyes remained thoughtful. He crossed to the desk and examined the drawer on the right-hand side. It slid open smoothly. Inside were neatly stacked letters and documents. Nothing appeared disturbed, except that one bundle had been shifted slightly, its alignment imperfect. "Inspector," Poirot said quietly, "this drawer has been opened recently." Hale raised an eyebrow. "You are certain?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Order leaves fingerprints, monsieur, even when touched by careful hands." They examined the fireplace next. Hale poked gently through the ashes and retrieved the half-burned envelope Poirot had noticed earlier. "Addressed to Sir Lionel," Hale said. "Local postmark." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah! Correspondence intended, then destroyed, or partially destroyed." Outside the study, voices murmured softly. The others waited, suspended between fear and curiosity. Inspector Hale turned to Poirot. "You do not believe this was a natural death?" Poirot did not answer directly. Instead, he gestured around the room. "Look at it, Inspector. A man collapses suddenly. Yet nothing is knocked over, no sign of panic, and still something is wrong." What precisely? Poirot hesitated. Expectation, he said at last. Sir Lionel expected something. They left the study and Hale began formal interviews. Poirot listened, occasionally interjecting with a question that seemed harmless but carried weight. Miss Price repeated her account calmly. Sir Lionel rang for tea. I prepared it myself, as always. As always, Poirot echoed gently. And did he seem unwell? No, she said quickly. Perhaps distracted, but not ill. Clara, when questioned, admitted that her uncle had complained of fatigue recently. He would not see a doctor, she said. He disliked fuss. Poirot nodded. Many do. Mrs. Blundell added her own observations freely. He suspected theft, I believe, or deception. He asked me whether one could ever truly know those closest to us. And what did you reply? Poirot asked. That one always knows, she said firmly. Eventually. Mr. Whitcomb, interviewed last, was less cooperative. This is ridiculous, he said sharply. Lionel had a weak heart. Everyone knew it. Poirot's eyes flicked up. Did everyone? Whitcomb hesitated. Well, he mentioned it once. Poirot said nothing more. As evening approached, Inspector Hale prepared to leave, promising to return the following day. The body would be removed in the morning. Until then, Hale said, I advise no one to leave the house. After he departed, Ashcombe Court seemed to close in on itself. Dinner was a subdued affair. Little was eaten. Words were chosen carefully. Later, Poirot retired to his room but did not sleep. Instead, he sat by the window, his hands folded, his mind active. A death without violence, he reflected, was often the most deceptive. No weapon, no blood, no struggle. And yet death had come swiftly, decisively. Why now? He considered the tea, the letter, the anxious questions Sir Lionel had asked in recent days. Above all, he considered the state of mind of a man who believed himself threatened. Fear, Poirot knew, could be as powerful as any poison. At last he rose and made a quiet circuit of the house. In the pantry, he examined the tea tin. In the corridor, he paused outside the study. He noted the placement of doors, the distance between rooms, the timing of footsteps. When he returned to his room, the picture was still incomplete, but its outline was becoming clearer. Somewhere in Ashcombe Court, someone had known exactly what Sir Lionel feared, and had used it. Poirot extinguished the lamp and lay back, his moustache carefully arranged, his expression thoughtful. The method, he murmured softly into the darkness, is not in the hands but in the mind. And with that realization, the mystery deepened. Chapter 4. Motives beneath polite faces. Morning arrived at Ashcombe Court with deceptive gentleness. Pale sunlight filtered through the tall windows, illuminating polished floors and carefully arranged furniture, as though the house wished to present itself as unchanged. Yet the knowledge of death lingered in every corridor. Voices were quieter, footsteps more cautious. Even the servants moved with restrained solemnity. Poirot descended to the breakfast room precisely at 8 o'clock. He found the others already gathered, seated at measured distances from one another. Tea steamed gently. Plates remained largely untouched. "Good morning," Poirot said pleasantly. Replies came, but without warmth. Poirot sat and observed. In times of strain, people revealed themselves not through words, but through habits. Clara poured tea for everyone except herself. Mr. Whitcomb stared fixedly at the garden, tapping his fingers against the table. Mrs. Blundell surveyed the room with open curiosity, while Miss Price kept her eyes lowered, her posture rigid. After a few minutes, Poirot spoke. "Forgive me," he said, "but in such circumstances it is better to speak plainly. Silence creates imagination, and imagination creates fear." Mrs. Blundell nodded approvingly. Quite right. Poirot turned first to Clara. Mademoiselle, you manage this household. May I ask were there any recent changes to Sir Lionel's will or affairs? Clara hesitated only briefly. Yes, he intended to revise his will. Mr. Whitcomb stiffened. And the nature of these revisions? Poirot asked gently. Clara folded her hands. He wished to simplify matters. Certain arrangements were no longer appropriate. Whitcomb let out a sharp breath. Meaning what, precisely? Clara met his gaze calmly. Meaning that Uncle Lionel no longer trusted everyone involved in his business? An uncomfortable silence followed. Poirot watched Mr. Whitcomb closely. This would have affected you? Whitcomb's jaw tightened. We were partners for 20 years. And now? Poirot prompted. And now he wished to dissolve the partnership, Whitcomb said bluntly. Yes, that is true. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. A powerful motive, monsieur. But motive alone is not guilt. Whitcomb said nothing, but his knuckles whitened around his cup. Poirot next addressed Mrs. Blundell. Madame, you mentioned Sir Lionel asked you questions recently about trust. She leaned back. He did. He was worried. Thought someone close to him was deceiving him. Did he say who? No, but he was certain. Poirot inclined his head. Certainty without proof is dangerous. Finally, he turned to Miss Price. And you, mademoiselle. Sir Lionel depended upon you greatly. Miss Price looked up, startled. I did my work, that is all. Of course, Poirot said smoothly, but dependence creates opportunity. Her cheeks flushed. Are you accusing me? Non, non, Poirot replied quickly. I accuse no one, I observe. Breakfast ended shortly after. Poirot requested private conversations one by one. He began with Mr. Whitcomb. In the small sitting room, Poirot sat opposite him, hands folded. Tell me about the disagreement yesterday. Whitcomb sighed. Lionel believed someone had manipulated figures in the accounts. He thought it might be Evelyn. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Did you agree? I thought it unlikely, Whitcomb said. She is meticulous. Poirot smiled faintly. Meticulous people sometimes hide best. Whitcomb frowned. What are you implying? Nothing yet, Poirot replied. Only that Sir Lionel believed something serious enough to frighten him. Next, Poirot spoke with Mrs. Blundell. She was less guarded. Sir Lionel asked me whether a person could cause harm without laying a finger on another. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. A curious question. I thought so too, she said. I told him fear itself could be deadly. Poirot studied her intently. And how did he respond? He laughed, she said slowly. But it was not a happy laugh. Lastly, Poirot requested Miss Price's company in the study doorway. She stood stiffly, hands clasped. I have already told the inspector everything. Indeed, Poirot said kindly. Then allow me a different question. Did Sir Lionel trust you? She hesitated. I believe so. Poirot nodded. Belief is not knowledge. He gestured toward the desk. You worked here often? Yes. You knew his habits? Yes. You knew his fears? Her lips pressed together. He had many. Poirot leaned closer. And did he share them with you? Miss Price's composure cracked for just a moment. He suspected me, she said quietly. Of carelessness, nothing more. Poirot straightened. Nothing more can be everything. That afternoon, Poirot walked the grounds alone, replaying each conversation. The motives were emerging clearly. Financial loss, fear of exposure, loss of control. Yet none alone explained the method. He paused near the rose garden, where Mrs. Blundell had claimed to be at the time of death. The path was neat, the roses carefully trimmed, no sign of disturbance. Poirot smiled faintly. "So," he murmured, "we have motives, but no violence. Opportunity, but no struggle." He returned indoors and stood once more outside the study. A man alone, a cup of tea, a fear already planted. Inside the house, everyone had something to lose, and someone had chosen a method that required neither strength nor haste, only understanding. "The mind," Poirot said softly to himself, "is the sharpest weapon of all." By the end of the day, Poirot was certain of one thing. Sir Lionel Ashcombe had not died simply because his heart failed him. He had been pushed, not by a hand, but by truth revealed at exactly the wrong moment. And soon Poirot intended to uncover who had delivered it. Chapter 5. Fragments that refused to vanish. The fifth day at Ashcombe Court unfolded with an uneasy stillness that pressed upon the senses. The household functioned, but without rhythm. Bells rang too late, doors closed too softly. Even the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to hesitate before each measured chime. Poirot welcomed the quiet. Disorder of the mind, he knew, revealed itself most clearly when the world slowed. He began his morning not with conversation, but with observation. Rather than questioning the residents, he watched them move through their routines. Clara reviewed correspondence in the morning room, her pen gliding steadily, though she paused often to stare into space. Mr. Whitcomb took a brisk walk along the gravel drive, returning flushed and irritable. Mrs. Blundell stationed herself near the window with a book she did not read. Miss Price passed silently between rooms, efficient and restrained, never lingering. Poirot noticed something else as well. None of them entered the study. That avoidance interested him greatly. Late in the morning, Poirot requested access to the household stores. The housekeeper, relieved to be given a practical task, led him to the pantry. Shelves lined the walls, labelled and organised with care. Tea tins, sugar jars, spices, medicines. Poirot examined each with methodical patience. The tea leaves were ordinary, fresh, unremarkable. He opened the tin, inhaled, and replaced the lid. Then his attention shifted to a smaller cabinet at the far end of the room. "What is kept here?" he asked. "Remedies," the housekeeper replied. Sir Lionel insisted. "Tonics, powders, things of that sort." Poirot nodded. He opened the cabinet slowly. There were bottles from the local apothecary, digestive aids, sleeping draughts, heart stimulants, all legal, all common, almost all. Poirot lifted one small vial, turning it toward the light. The label was neat, the cork recently handled. It was not empty, but it was not full either. "Who used this?" Poirot asked mildly. The housekeeper frowned. "Miss Price, I believe. She fetched things for Sir Lionel when he asked." Poirot replaced the vial with care. That afternoon he took a walk through the corridors, counting his steps, noting distances, from pantry to study, from study to sitting room, from sitting room to the east stairs. Timing, Poirot reflected, was often mistaken for opportunity. In truth, opportunity lay in familiarity. He paused outside Miss Price's room. The door was closed. He did not knock. Instead, he observed the floor beneath the threshold. Clean. No dust disturbed. No hurried comings and goings. Later, in the drawing room, Poirot invited Mrs. Blundell to join him for tea. She accepted eagerly. "You are enjoying yourself far too much, monsieur," she said lightly. Poirot smiled. "On the contrary, madame, I am enjoying the clarity." She raised an eyebrow. "And have you found it?" "Almost," Poirot replied. He changed the subject. "You have known Sir Lionel for many years." "Since he was a young man," she said. "Ambitious, careful." "Careful," Poirot repeated. Did he fear illness? Not particularly, she replied, but he feared scandal. Poirot leaned forward. Did he ever speak of sudden death? She paused. Only once. He said that some shocks were too great for the body to bear. Poirot nodded, as though confirming a private thought. That evening, Poirot returned alone to the study. Permission had been granted now that the police had completed their examination. The room felt altered without Sir Lionel's presence, not emptier, but unanchored. Poirot stood by the desk and closed his eyes, briefly reconstructing the scene. Sir Lionel seated, papers before him, tea delivered, a conversation perhaps, or a discovery. Poirot opened the desk drawer and removed the remaining documents. Beneath them he found something previously overlooked, a thin notebook, its cover worn smooth. Inside were notes written in Sir Lionel's hand, short entries, observations, names. Poirot read carefully, discrepancies in accounts, missing funds, errors that were too consistent to be accidental, and one final line, written shakily, "Confront her today." Poirot closed the notebook gently. Outside, footsteps approached. Poirot turned to find Miss Price standing in the doorway. She looked startled to see him there. "I didn't realize anyone was inside," she said. "I'm glad you came," Poirot replied calmly. "I wish to speak with you." Her shoulders stiffened. "About what?" "About habit," Poirot said. Sir Lionel trusted routine. Tea at 4, letters opened at his desk, remedies taken when anxious. She said nothing. Poirot continued. He believed something alarming, enough to frighten him, enough to weaken him. Her voice was tight. "You are speculating." "No," Poirot replied gently. "I am reconstructing." She took a step back. "I did nothing wrong." Poirot did not challenge her. Instead, he said softly, "Fear does not require wrongdoing, only belief." She left abruptly, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Poirot remained alone. The pieces were no longer scattered. They resisted vanishing. They pressed together, forming a shape that could not be ignored. A man already anxious, a trusted figure, a suggestion, a certainty planted like a seed. Poirot returned the notebook to the drawer and closed it carefully. "The truth," he murmured, "has no need to hurry." As night fell over Ashcombe Court, Poirot was certain of another thing. The method had been subtle, precise, and cruelly intelligent, and the person responsible believed even now that no trace remained. They were mistaken. Chapter 6. The Shape of a Lie. By the 6th day, Ashcombe Court had begun to feel less like a home and more like a carefully arranged stage. Each person moved through their part with caution, aware that every gesture might be observed, every word weighed. Poirot welcomed this awareness. When people were conscious of being watched, they often revealed more than they intended. The morning brought rain, fine and persistent, tapping softly against the windows. Poirot stood for a long while in the hall, listening to it. Rain, he reflected, encouraged honesty. It slowed the world and softened resistance. Inspector Hale returned shortly after breakfast. His manner was courteous, but there was impatience beneath it. "No new findings from the post-mortem," he told Poirot quietly. "The heart simply gave out." Poirot nodded. "Yes, the body agrees with that conclusion." "And you do not?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "I believe the body is telling only half the story." Hale sighed. "You have something concrete?" "Not yet," Poirot admitted. "But I have shape. And shape, Inspector, is the beginning of certainty." Hale left to conduct further formalities, and Poirot resumed his quiet watch. He noticed that Mr. Whitcomb lingered near the telephone more than once, lifting the receiver only to replace it again. When approached, Whitcomb explained irritably that he was awaiting word from London. Poirot accepted the explanation without comment, but stored it away. Clara spent the morning sorting papers from her uncle's office. Poirot joined her briefly. "You are very composed," he remarked. She smiled faintly. "Someone must be." "And yet," Poirot said gently, "composure can be a form of defense." She looked at him steadily. "Are you suggesting I am hiding something?" "I suggest nothing," Poirot replied. "I observe balance. You are not relieved, mademoiselle, but you are no longer afraid." She considered this. "Uncle Lionel frightened himself. That much is certain." Poirot inclined his head. "Indeed." Later, Poirot found Mrs. Blundell seated near the fire, knitting with determination. He sat opposite her. "You have been very attentive, madame," he said. "Always watching." She smiled. "At my age one watches because one has seen how often appearances deceive." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Then tell me, who here deceives themselves?" Mrs. Blundell paused, her needles stilling. "Mr. Whitcomb fears loss. Clara fears chaos. Miss Price fears exposure." "And you?" Poirot asked. She met his gaze. "I fear nothing, which is why I see clearly." Poirot smiled. Her answer, though confident, had been too swift. That afternoon, Poirot requested to speak again with Miss Price. She arrived promptly, her expression controlled. "You wish to see me, monsieur?" "Yes," Poirot said, "to clarify something." He gestured for her to sit. Sir Lionel kept notes. He suspected financial irregularities. Her fingers tightened in her lap. He was mistaken. "Perhaps," Poirot agreed. "But suspicion alone can be dangerous." She nodded stiffly. "I have told you everything." Poirot studied her face. "Did Sir Lionel confront you?" A flicker crossed her eyes, too brief to be accidental. "He asked questions," she said carefully. "And your answers?" Poirot pressed. She stood abruptly. "I am tired of this." Poirot did not stop her. Instead, he said quietly, "Fatigue follows lies like a shadow." She left without another word. As evening approached, Poirot reviewed his thoughts. The evidence, taken alone, remained insufficient. No proof of poison, no witness to confrontation, only impressions, habits, and psychology. Then, as he passed through the pantry once more, he noticed something that had changed. The small vial he had examined earlier had been moved. Not much, just enough. Poirot smiled. That night, he did not retire immediately. Instead, he waited in the dim sitting room, the lamp turned low. At last, soft footsteps approached. Miss Price entered, believing herself alone. She went to the cabinet and hesitated. Poirot spoke gently from the shadows. "You are looking for reassurance." She froze. "I am not here to accuse you," Poirot continued calmly. "Only to understand." She turned slowly. "You think I killed him?" "I think," Poirot said, "that you spoke truth once and then built a lie to protect it." Her composure wavered. "He frightened himself, that is all." Poirot nodded. "Yes. But someone frightened him first." She said nothing. Poirot stood. Sir Lionel believed he had uncovered wrongdoing. He intended to confront the person he trusted most. The shock was enough. Her voice was barely audible. "I never meant—" Poirot raised a hand. "Save it. The truth will speak tomorrow." He left her standing there, the rain still tapping at the windows. In his room, Poirot allowed himself a long breath. The lie had taken shape. It no longer shifted. It no longer hid. All that remained was to gather the players, present the pattern, and allow the truth to complete itself. "The end," Poirot murmured softly, "is always orderly." And with that assurance, he prepared for the final act. Chapter 7. When silence becomes dangerous. Ashcombe Court awoke beneath a sky of pale grey, the rain finally spent but leaving behind a heavy dampness that clung to stone and spirit alike. The air inside the house felt expectant, as though the walls themselves were waiting. By now, everyone sensed that the long restraint could not last much longer. Poirot felt it too. He rose early and dressed with particular care, smoothing his moustache until it curved with immaculate precision. Order, he reminded himself, must be visible before it can be persuasive. Downstairs the servants moved quietly, avoiding one another's eyes. Breakfast was laid out but barely touched. Poirot entered the room to find Clara already present, standing by the window. She turned as he approached. "You hardly slept," she observed. Poirot smiled faintly. "On the contrary, mademoiselle, I slept very well. When the mind is close to resolution, it rests easily." She studied him. "Then it is nearly over?" "Yes," Poirot said. "But not yet." Mr. Whitcomb arrived next, his coat already on, hat in hand. "I have business in London," he announced sharply. "I assume there is no reason I cannot leave?" Poirot looked at him calmly. "On the contrary, monsieur, there is every reason." Whitcomb bristled. "This is absurd. The police found nothing." Poirot inclined his head. "They found nothing physical. That is not the same thing." Mrs. Blundell entered moments later, her expression alert, almost satisfied. Miss Price came last. She appeared composed, but the tension beneath her calm was unmistakable. Her eyes did not meet Poirot's. Inspector Hale arrived shortly thereafter, shaking rain from his coat. "You asked us all to be present," he said to Poirot. "I hope this is not another exercise in theory." Poirot smiled. "Inspector, today I will offer something more complete." They gathered in the drawing-room, seated as before, yet no longer at ease. Poirot remained standing. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "Sir Lionel Ashcombe did not die by violence. No blow struck him. No poison overwhelmed his body. And yet his death was not an accident." Hale folded his arms. "We have been over this." "Indeed," Poirot said calmly. "But we have not been over motive combined with method." He paced slowly. Sir Lionel was a careful man. He valued routine, order, and certainty. Recently, however, his certainty was disturbed. He believed he had uncovered a serious deception, one that threatened his reputation and his control. Poirot paused, letting the words settle. He began to observe, to take notes, to calculate, and when he believed he knew the truth, he decided to confront the person responsible. Miss Price stiffened. Poirot continued. This confrontation did not require shouting. It required only implication, a suggestion, a confirmation of fear. Mr. Whitcomb scoffed. "This is speculation." Poirot turned to him. "Is it?" "Sir Lionel was anxious, monsieur. You knew this. You dismissed it. Others noticed it. Fear once planted grows quickly." Mrs. Blundell nodded slowly. Poirot faced the group once more. On the afternoon of his death, Sir Lionel believed himself to be in danger. He expected harm. His body responded to that belief. Inspector Hale frowned. "Belief alone cannot kill a man." Poirot raised a finger. "Ah, but shock can, anticipation can, especially in a man already under strain." He turned toward Miss Price. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "Sir Lionel trusted you. He confided in you. He depended upon your precision." Her lips parted, but no sound came. "He confronted you," Poirot continued. "Not with accusations, but with certainty. He told you what he believed you had done. He told you what he intended to do next." Miss Price's hands trembled slightly. "And in that moment," Poirot said, "you did not need to strike him. You did not need to poison him. You needed only to confirm his fear." The room was utterly still. "You prepared his tea," Poirot said softly. "Not to kill him, but to frighten him. You allowed him to believe it was dangerous. His heart did the rest." Inspector Hale stepped forward. "You are suggesting psychological murder?" Poirot nodded. "Yes." Miss Price shook her head weakly. "I never told him it was poisoned." "No," Poirot agreed. "You did not need to. You allowed him to believe it. Silence can be as persuasive as words." Her composure collapsed. "He was wrong," she cried. "The accounts, there were errors, yes, but not theft. He panicked. He accused me. He said my career was finished." Poirot's voice remained calm. "And you panicked in return?" Tears streamed down her face. "I wanted him to stop. I wanted him to doubt himself." Poirot lowered his head slightly. "Instead, you confirmed his worst fear." Inspector Hale exhaled slowly. "This is highly unusual." "But consistent," Poirot said, "with the notes, with the routine, with the absence of force." Miss Price sank into a chair, sobbing quietly. Poirot addressed the room one final time. "Sir Lionel Ashcombe died because he believed his world had turned against him. Someone he trusted allowed that belief to become fatal." Silence followed. Long, heavy, unavoidable. Poirot straightened his jacket. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will explain how each detail aligns and why no other conclusion is possible." He looked at Miss Price with quiet gravity. "For now," he added, "the truth has spoken loudly enough." And in the stillness that followed, Ashcombe Court seemed at last to exhale, knowing that the final reckoning was close at hand. Chapter 8. Order Restored. The drawing room at Ashcombe Court was filled once more, but the atmosphere had changed entirely. What had once been tension now felt like inevitability. The curtains were drawn back, letting in the clear morning light, and the rain-washed windows reflected a world that had moved on, indifferent to human secrets. Poirot stood near the fireplace, his posture immaculate, his expression composed. Inspector Hale occupied a chair to one side, notebook ready. Clara Ashcombe sat upright, pale but resolute. Mr. Whitcomb leaned stiffly against the mantelpiece, arms folded. Mrs. Blundell watched with open, unblinking interest. Miss Evelyn Price sat apart from the others, her hands clasped tightly, her face drained of colour. Poirot cleared his throat softly. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "today I will not speak in fragments. I will speak in order, and when one restores order, the truth becomes unavoidable." He turned slightly, ensuring he could see them all. Sir Lionel Ashcombe was a man who trusted routine. He believed that discipline protected him from chaos, from error, from betrayal. For many years that belief served him well, but recently something disturbed it. Poirot lifted the thin notebook from his pocket and placed it on the table. "These notes," he continued, "were Sir Lionel's attempt to impose control upon uncertainty. He observed irregularities in his financial records, small discrepancies, repeated often enough to suggest intention." Mr. Whitcomb shifted. "Those discrepancies proved nothing." "Individually, no," Poirot agreed, "but collectively, they created fear. And fear was Sir Lionel's undoing." He looked at Miss Price. "Sir Lionel trusted you, mademoiselle. You managed his correspondence, his figures, his remedies. You were efficiency itself. When he discovered what he believed to be deception, he did not go to the police. He came to you." Miss Price's eyes filled, but she did not speak. Poirot continued calmly. "He confronted you on the afternoon of his death, not angrily, but firmly. He told you what he believed. He told you he intended to act." Clara inhaled sharply. "You mean he told her before the tea?" "Precisely," Poirot replied. The tea was not the beginning, it was the end. Inspector Hale leaned forward. "Then explain the method, monsieur, clearly." Poirot nodded. Sir Lionel was already anxious. He believed himself betrayed. When Miss Price prepared his tea, she did not need to add poison. Instead, she allowed him to believe that something was wrong. A hesitation, a look, a suggestion that confirmed his fear. Miss Price whispered, "I never said it was poisoned." "No," Poirot said gently. "You did not have to. Fear completes the sentence." He paced slowly. Sir Lionel believed the tea dangerous. His heart, already strained by worry, responded violently. The shock was enough. Death followed swiftly. Inspector Hale exhaled. "And the evidence?" Poirot smiled faintly. The untouched second cup, the vial from the apothecary, handled recently, but not emptied. The burned letter, destroyed after its purpose was served, and above all, the psychology of the victim. He turned to the others. Mr. Whitcomb had motive, but no subtlety. Mrs. Blundell had insight, but no reason. Clara Ashcombe had inheritance, but no opportunity. Only Miss Price possessed the access, the trust, and the precise understanding of Sir Lionel's habits. Miss Price's shoulders sagged. "I only wanted him to doubt himself," she said quietly. "I never thought—" Poirot raised a hand, not unkindly. "Intention does not erase consequence," he said. "You used fear as a tool. You underestimated its power." Inspector Hale stood. "Miss Price, you will need to come with us." She rose unsteadily, her composure finally gone. As she was led away, the room remained silent. Poirot waited until the door closed. "At last," he said softly. "Order." Mrs. Blundell nodded slowly. "An invisible crime, most unsettling." "Yes," Poirot replied. "Those are often the most dangerous." Clara stood and approached him. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. For the truth?" Poirot bowed slightly. "Truth is rarely comfortable, mademoiselle, but it is necessary." Inspector Hale extended his hand. "You have given us a great deal to consider." Poirot shook it. "The mind leaves traces, Inspector. One must simply know where to look." As the others departed, Poirot remained alone for a moment, gazing around the room. Ashcombe Court felt different now, not lighter, but resolved. Secrets had weight. Once lifted, balance returned. Poirot adjusted his moustache, satisfied. "A tragic case," he murmured, "but an orderly conclusion." Outside, the sky was clear, and the gravel drive sparkled faintly in the sunlight. Poirot collected his hat and coat, ready to depart. The little grey cells, once again, had done their work. The case is closed, but the next mystery is already waiting. This is unknown suspect,